Welcome to the 9th webinar in the COVID-19 Ask the Experts webinar series. This webinar will address the specific process for care for the caregivers, information for school leaders and crisis teams. I am Stacy Kalamaros Skalski, and I am NASP Director of Professional Policy and Practice, and I'll be your moderator for this webinar. The Ask the Experts webinar series is a collection of recorded webinars that are posted on the NASP website. These webinars are designed to offer support to school psychologists and graduate students, practicum students, as they navigate the delivery of school psychological services during the pandemic. Each webinar is free and it's open to the public. At the conclusion of each webinar, we will offer a discussion thread on the NASP member exchange, and those of you who are NASP members may continue your discussion there. You can ask questions, you can post comments, you can engage these leaders and other leaders in the NASP community and family to address the issues that are important to you. Each webinar will address critical questions that emerge as a result of the need to provide virtual telehealth services. They will provide advice and guidance from our experts, and they'll offer suggested strategies and resources for addressing professional practice issues. Today, we'll be hearing from 4 different experts knowledgeable about self-care in the school psychology. First, Lisa Coffey. Lisa is the Senior Administrator for Psychological and Social Services in the Orange County Public Schools in Florida. She earned her bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Florida and her educational specialist degree in school psychology from the University of South Florida. Lisa earned her educational leadership and certification from the University of Central Florida. Lisa is a member of the NASP School Safety Crisis Response Committee and is a past president of the Florida Association of School Psychologists. Welcome, Lisa. Secondly, we have Dr. Franci Crepeau-Hobson. Franci is an associate professor and director of clinical training in the school psychology program at the University of Colorado at Denver. Franci is a licensed school psychologist, a licensed psychologist, and the co-chair of the National Association of School Safety and Crisis Response Committee. She is also a member of the Colorado Society of School Psychologists statewide crisis response team. Franci's areas of research include youth suicide, school safety, and crisis response and intervention. Welcome, Franci. Our next expert joining us today will be Ben Fernandez. Ben works for the Loudoun County Public Schools and is a lead school psychologist providing leadership to school psychologists in a broad array of psychological and school-based mental health services, including assessment, consultation, counseling, prevention, and intervention. He is a member of NASP's School Safety and Crisis Response Committee also. In 2012, he was named School Psychologist of the Year by NASP. Ben earned his graduate and school psych degree from Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. Ross Pesce is the School Psychology Coordinator of Clinical Training at Loyola University in Chicago. Ross is a licensed school and clinical psychologist. Ross is a past president of the Illinois School Psychologists Association and was the 2001 NASP School Psychologist of the Year. He has been involved in crisis prevention and intervention work for decades. His service activities include continued prevention efforts at the high school district from which he retired with a focus on community health and safety. Ross also enjoys mentoring newly trained prepare trainers. He's a member of the School Safety and Crisis Response Committee, and he is engaged in advocacy and the Promotion to Tell program. Welcome to Ross. I want to thank all of you for participating and sharing your expertise in this webinar today. And I think we'll be turning it over to Franci to get us started. Franci?
Thanks, Stacy. Welcome, everybody. And we thought we'd start today with defining self-care just to make sure we are all on the same page. And really what we're talking about is doing things to make ourselves feel better, both physically and emotionally. I saw in the professional literature recently a new term, at least it was new to me. People are talking about self-care in the context of career-sustaining behaviors, which is a nice way of putting it because we're really talking about how do we prevent the negative consequences of work stress and how do we promote really positive outcomes such as optimal professional functioning and enhanced well-being. Self-care really is an ethical obligation. If we don't attend to self-care, if we don't take care of ourselves, we could risk putting ourselves in diminished ability or diminished capacity to function professionally. And then we won't be able to provide effective services. And ultimately, we risk increasing harm to kids and their families who we work with.
Great, thank you. So, Franci, why is caring for the caregiver important for school leaders and crisis teams during this pandemic?
Stacy, there's been a ton of research, especially over the last couple of decades, focusing on how important self-care is in general, but it's especially important right now because the COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis unlike anything we've ever seen before. Unlike other events, this is affecting virtually every community in some way. We're talking about a constantly evolving situation. So unlike an acute traumatic stressor that has a discrete beginning and end, the COVID-19 pandemic is this ongoing event that has the potential to cause chronic stress. And when we're in chronic stress, we're walking around in this constant state of alertness, despite there not really being any immediate danger. So we really have to attend to taking care of ourselves in this crisis because it's ongoing and it creates significant stress and uncertainty for everybody. Leaders can support themselves and others more effectively by really understanding what puts individuals at higher risk for traumatic stress, as well as having a really good understanding of what are things that are helpful, what are stress mediation strategies that people can employ to combat that traumatic stress. We know when educators, administrators, mental health staff all engage in self-care activities, that promotes a sense of safety and security, and it strengthens the entire educational system. And that leads to better outcomes for kids and adults alike.
Great. Thank you, Franci. Let's go to Ross. Ross, what makes COVID-19 unique?
Stacy, I'd like to cover a couple of ideas, one of which Franci already discussed slightly, and that is chronic stress. Unlike an acute traumatic stressor that has a discrete beginning and end, the COVID-19 pandemic is an ongoing event, and because of that, has the potential to cause chronic stress. Chronic stress causes the body to stay in a constant state of alertness despite being in no immediate danger. Prolonged chronic stress can disturb all the major systems in the body, like immune, digestive, cardiovascular, and sleep, and can also increase risk for psychiatric disorders and some physical disorders such as cardiovascular diseases and diabetes. We also have associated grief. The pandemic has resulted in a great deal of loss for school leaders and other educators. Schools are a type of community in and of themselves. Most staff members feel very connected to their schools and to work colleagues. The mandates to close schools and engage in distance learning have disrupted those connections. For school leaders who feel responsible for that community, the sense of loss might be especially profound.
I think your comments about the profound nature of the loss that people are experiencing right now is something that certainly resonates with all of us. Let's go to question 3 then. Ross, what are some feelings common to loss, especially the losses experienced because of COVID-19?
Okay, so COVID-19 definitely has resulted in feelings of grief. Grief is a natural response to such a loss, and it is not unusual for educators to feel a sense of sadness, emptiness, guilt, anxiety, and/or anger. It is important that school leaders and other educators allow themselves to grieve and provide a healthy model of mourning for others by talking about the sense of loss and sharing their feelings with others. These are some of the losses related to the virus. Social connections. We no longer may have contact with close friends. Children are not able to play together, no in-person social engagement, no touching or hugging, etc. This can be quite disruptive to our emotional well-being. Another loss is a disruption of daily life activities. We have lost the way we can carry out our daily lives, and it is no longer safe to continue as in the past. We can't engage in many of our familiar routines anymore. Next, we've lost our sense of safety. We may have started to question our assumptions of safety and security. We may be losing our own sense of safety in the environment and question our ability to stay safe. The changing nature of what is known about the virus has contributed to this loss of safety and security. We have lost trust in our systems. Government leaders and agencies, medical systems, religious bodies, the stock market, and corporations may also be perceived as having failed to meet our expectations. And we have also lost certainty about the future. Anticipatory grief is the feeling we get when the future is uncertain. The current situation is more confusing because the threat is something that we cannot see, thus compromising our general sense of safety. In addition to these losses, we also have feelings of grief of others. Even if not directly affected by a specific loss, we tend to feel the grief of others. This compassionate grief can be just as painful as a personal loss.
Wow, I'm sitting here reflecting myself as a mom of a high school senior. I think everything that you've laid out are part of our evening conversations and are certainly things that our kids are thinking about every day, let alone their teachers and their parents. Let's go to question 4 then, and let's talk a little bit, if we can. Ben, if you can answer this, what should school leaders and crisis team members be on the alert for during this pandemic?
Thanks, Stacy. Like children, adults in the school community will also experience varying reactions when experiencing or learning about crises, and in particular what we're going through with COVID-19. It's important to remember that there are a number of different factors that will influence a person's individual reaction, including characteristics of that person, whether they have a pre-existing risk factors like mental illness. Additionally, there are other crisis variables that will interact and influence the reactions that these people can display. Also, events that are somewhat predictable and of shorter duration are generally less traumatic, and those with a sudden onset, compared to those that are longer lasting, which what we're dealing with now with the rapidly evolving and prolonged situation of the pandemic makes this crisis especially tricky in terms of addressing that potential impact. But in terms of what to look for, the signs and symptoms of chronic stress and secondary trauma can sometimes be observed, by others, and other times they only may be known by the individual themselves. So, it's important that monitoring both ourselves or oneself and colleagues is really important. Indicators of chronic stress and secondary trauma can come in the form of physical reactions, emotional symptoms, or social and interpersonal signs. Specifically, when we talk about the physical reaction, we might see things such as chronic fatigue and exhaustion. Those are tend to be frequently reported. We also may see difficulty paying attention, some confusion, hypervigilance, headaches, stomach aches, or muscle tensions can also be felt. And also, you might see some difficulty sleeping and eating. In terms of emotional symptoms, you might see excessive worry or anxiety, disconnection or numbing, feelings of anger, compassion fatigue, demoralization, or resignation, recurring crisis thoughts or distressing dreams, and even some confusion and difficulty in making everyday decisions can occur. And then sometimes people may experience sadness, depression, hopelessness, and/or suicidal thoughts. And then in terms of the social and interpersonal signs, those can include difficulties in relationships at home or at work, irritability, outbursts of anger, social withdrawal, or social isolation. You may also see some excessive use of alcohol and other substances, and that can be also warning signs of stress or secondary trauma.
So given all of these, then what are the challenges in identifying and supporting vulnerable staff and colleagues?
With physical distancing, that makes it really difficult to identify and support vulnerable staff and colleagues. However, there are some strategies that I think school leaders might find helpful with this regard. The first being, if you are aware of a staff member or a colleague who is struggling with, mental health challenges or, significant stressors before the pandemic, make a point to reach out to them virtually on a regular basis. This, provides that opportunity to check in, ask how they're doing, and what they are doing to take care of themselves. This also allows for school leaders to begin to gauge how staff members are doing, as well as to share information, such as information like the employee assistance programs in your districts. It's also important to loop in your mental health staff. They can also reach out and provide additional support and resources to staff. Next, offer regular office hours for staff to drop in and connect with you and other colleagues. Consider inviting mental health staff to participate, and they may, they will pick up concerns or issues that other staff may be experiencing. And then finally, provide opportunities for virtual social connectedness for all staff. This could be, checking in addition to checking in, reducing social isolation for those who attend. It can also provide the opportunity for those who may need some direct check-ins.
So it sounds like really critical is making yourself accessible and available to support others as a first priority in this process. Let's turn to Lisa then. And Lisa, can you tell us a little bit, what are strategies school leaders can use to produce a climate of care and support for others?
Well, Stacy, there are several strategies that school leaders can use to create that climate of support. School leaders can help facilitate adaptive coping and recovery by providing school personnel with access to supports from crisis responders or other mental health professionals, making sure to share that information during those virtual staff meetings or via email, making sure to be specific about what the supports are that are available and how to access those, whether they're district supports, community supports, or employee assistance programs. It's really important to note, though, that school leaders should be aware of the potential stigma that school personnel might have about accessing those mental health services and EAPs. Another way that you can help create a climate of support includes having mental health staff, crisis team members, and administrators available for regular office hours, like what Ben had mentioned. Having an identified way to connect with school leaders can really help create that culture of support. A virtual group or caregiver meeting for staff might be another way that staff could help themselves process and problem solve what was going on. Those are some strategies that could really help staff feel adequately supported during this COVID-19 crisis. School leaders can also help reduce feelings of social isolation and distance by really encouraging that non-work related social connectedness. There have been really wonderful examples of positive social media groups and car birthday party parades, videos, and virtual meetups that allow staff to connect to one another when they aren't physically with one another.
And let us not forget the ever so important virtual happy hour, which all of us seem to be perfecting.
Absolutely.
All right, Lisa, what are some strategies that school leaders and crisis team members can use for providing direct support then?
So school leaders can use a virtual classroom buddy system. This gives teachers an option of having a school mental health professional assigned to their classroom so that they can turn to that person for advice and support as they get through this difficult time. That buddy could also help them address crisis concerns that might arise during instructional time. They could even provide mini breaks for the teacher if needed, or help identify those students and other teachers who might have those significant coping challenges and connect them to more supports and interventions. School leaders and crisis team members can connect with staff daily using platforms that allow for that written, visual, and auditory connection, those emails, phone calls, videos, online meetings. Having consistent messages sent to staff through those modes that really convey a desire to check in and connect with others is a way that they can help staff during these times. Daily or frequent messages sent with positive and uplifting content can really help provide direct support and give a tone for the day. Those messages could include things like short quotes that have things related to hope or resilience or thankfulness. Could be funny messages. We all need to find some humor these days. So things that bring humor, laughter, smiles, like video clips or movie clips or YouTube videos. There's some funny TED Talks out there. Messages, that really just kind of uplift people. School leaders could also just make sure to communicate with factual details about specific actions that need to be taken to just ensure safety and security. Direct support could also be sharing strategies for coping and emphasizing that care for caregiver culture, letting folks know that it is absolutely okay and even expected that they might need to ask for assistance or breaks. School leaders and crisis team members can really foster feelings of team connectedness by playing virtual games or having spirit days, having friendly competitions amongst staff, or even creating some staff videos. Everybody can be doing that from their individual remote location, but still be doing something together. The content, again, for those things would be hope, resiliency, and definitely support. Pictures and videos from those activities can be shared with one another, shared with other schools and other colleagues, or even with students.
I am reminded each week of how much relief is provided by the videos of the healthcare workers that are out there. Their amazing ability to sing and dance on command is something I certainly admire. And I have to say, for my own personal self, the Saturday Night Live interpretations that happen weekly have certainly made my experience a little bit less stressful, and I've really valued that from a standpoint of the reducing of anxiety too. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit then, Franci, specifically about these type of self-care strategies. What are some effective strategies that are out there for self-care that we can offer to our school psychologists, administrators, and crisis team members?
Well, Stacy, there's quite a range, and it's important that people keep in mind that we're not talking about like a one and done kind of thing. Like, I went to the spa, check. Well, you can't go to the spa right now, but you know, something like that. We're really talking about a wide range of activities across multiple life domains. And these will likely vary across individuals depending on, you know, personal preferences and life situations. That said, there are some strategies that might be particularly helpful in managing some of the challenges associated with this particular crisis. First, create a structure and routine for your day. Maintaining a daily routine and building structure into the day can foster a sense of control. This also brings predictability to this really unpredictable situation. That predictability, that sense of control, really can help to reduce stress responses and keep our bodies regulated, and it helps facilitate recovery. For example, continue to get up and out of bed at the same time and get dressed. Tell you how many people are like, yeah, I just stay in my pajamas all day. Bad idea. Get up and get dressed like you would any other work day. I'm assuming you get dressed for regular work days. Have specific times and deadlines to complete tasks. So, you know, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to do this like I usually do, for example. Have a designated workspace if you're working from home, which most of us are. I've been working from my kitchen island, which is a really bad idea because the pantry's right behind me and the refrigerator right across. But it's my space, and that's being honored. So whatever works for people. Exercise the same time every day, especially if that's something you had done previously. Have family meals, sit down together and eat together as a family. Have a consistent bedtime. Those kinds of things can go a long way in terms of helping us feel more in control and less stressed. Second, reduce and limit exposure to media coverage of the pandemic, which I know is really challenging because that's all that's on, it seems, anymore. But keep in mind that the anxiety associated with this, the unpredictable and uncontrollable nature of this pandemic really makes us crave information. That helps us make sense of what's going on and regain control. However, if you're watching media coverage for long periods of time, that can actually increase your anxiety because that keeps your stress responses, your stress response systems activated. So as a way to reduce stress, get news from only reputable sources. Watch or read the news for short periods of time, literally like no more than 30 minutes at a time. And ideally, do some kind of regulating activity after you've watched the news because you've already gotten, you know, you've stimulated your arousal system. So go for a quick walk. That helps get you regulated. And don't watch the news or read the news right before bed because your stress systems are going to be activated and you're not going to be able to get good sleep. Third, attend to your physical self-care. So this is like doing things that we tell our kids and other clients to do all the time, like get adequate sleep. Do take breaks during your workday. Keep in mind that we're not able to, our cortexes are not at 100% because we're in this chronic state of stress. So taking those breaks can be really, really helpful in terms of productivity. Use exercise. That's really helpful for stress reduction. Even taking walks or a quick bike ride can help calm the physical body. Eat healthy foods. Limit the use of alcohol, as those can interfere with sleep. And really, this is not something we should be relying on to help with coping or relaxing. Use stress management techniques like yoga and deep breathing, calming self-talk, or soothing music. Next, it's really important to care for your emotional health. Find a balance between work and home. That's really critical, especially during times like this when crisis demands are adding to our already busy workloads. Use good time management skills and use priority setting. That can help us focus on something practical to do right now to help us manage the situation. Try and keep in mind the difference between things we can change, whether it's in the system we're working in or in the world, and accept those things you can't. Identify things to be grateful for. That is a fantastic strategy in terms of shifting our mindset. And also, cut yourself some slack. Know that you're not going to be perfect right now. Know that you're not going to be at 100%. Engage in some self-compassion. And then finally, maintaining social connections and focusing on social care is really important because that contributes to resilience. We can still talk and listen to each other while maintaining physical distance. Appreciate that family and friends are important and let them know. Practice your spiritual or religious faith. That might provide comfort or calming. Additionally, stress can be reduced when people turn to action. Engage in acts of kindness, activism, advocacy. Also, continue to engage in hobbies or passions for creativity. And finally, something Stacy's really good at. Look for some humor and goodness in life during this stressful time.
So your comments just really remind me of something that my children's orthodontist said to me recently, and she said, Stace, this isn't a time for social distancing. It's just a time for spatial distancing. And she really emphasized, with me at least, the importance of maintaining all of those emotional connections that are fuel and food for our lives. And I love your suggestions because I feel like they're spot on, you know, in that way. So let's take a minute then. The feedback from all of you and the contributions of all of you are so significant. Let's take a moment, though, and let's think about what these key messages really are. First and foremost, that the COVID-19 pandemic is rapidly evolving situation that's causing a lot of stress and uncertainty. We need to try and give ourselves a break to think about how we can best adapt to this situation, try and maintain as much persistence and patience as possible, and really look out for each other at these times. Secondly, that recovery from a situation or a crisis like this takes time, and it's not going to happen in a linear fashion. I'm constantly reminded that the stages of grief rarely occur in sequence, and that in this situation, we can expect the same. There may be days where we are in denial. There may be days where we are angry. There may be days where we are anxious. There may be days where it's just a ball of laughs for us. It all just seems so crazy and absurd that we're doing this. And I think it's important for everybody to remember that recovering from this will take time, and each of us needs to give ourselves space for that. Thirdly, there are steps that school leaders and crisis team members can take to foster health and well-being in themselves and others. We need to be intentional about our care for each other and our care for ourselves and the recovery that's needed from this pandemic. And in order for us to be effective as caregivers, we have to remember that we have to care for ourselves too. It is critical that we remain aware, we remain balanced, and that we stay connected. And that doing these things can help us and they help others. They help the kids that we work with, their families, and our colleagues. We need to try and take time and still celebrate all the small achievements. I'm encouraged by how many schools around the United States are working to find ways to celebrate the seniors in high school. I'm grateful for them as a mom. I'm thinking about all of the weddings that have occurred and around the world, and how people have found ways to share that celebration with their loved ones, even if they're not in the same physical space. And I'm reminded of how many families have gathered to celebrate the lives of their loved ones, and that in and of itself, the memories and tributes that have been put together for those people are all equally accomplishments in this time and space. Lastly, we need to make sure that we all take time to seek help if needed, that we reach out to one another, that we support one another, that we look out for one another in this path as we move ahead. As with each of our webinars, we've compiled for you a list of NASP resources that we think will be beneficial to you. There is one specific guidance document that the School Safety and Crisis Response Committee has put together on behalf of NASP called Care for the Caregiver. It is linked to this presentation as a downloadable handout, and you can also go into the PDF and the PowerPoint for this presentation and click on the link to that particular document, as well as the many other documents that we have available right now. We've also identified for you some external resources on self-care that we think can be very helpful to you. I encourage each and every one of our listeners to take the time to go through each of these, open them up, see how they might apply to your life and to your situation and be supportive to you. And again, they're listed for you in your handouts today that accompany this presentation. I want to take just a couple minutes and thank Franci and Ben and Lisa and Ross for sharing their expertise with us today. I'm especially grateful to the School Safety and Crisis Response Committee that's worked tirelessly to pull together all kinds of resources to help each and every one of us through this experience. We are indebted to you for your time and for your contributions. Thank you to all you listeners who will listen and share this webinar with each other. I invite you again to join the discussion thread on the NASP member exchange if you're a NASP member, and if you're not a NASP member, we always welcome you into our fold. Please join us. Until next time, please stay safe and stay healthy.